use those pieces of gear and or plugins and finish the record off. And things change from mix to master. And that's something I feel like people don't understand is when I change things from the mix to the master, that doesn't mean something was wrong with the mix. And that's most people's first approach is, hey, this changed and this changed. So what could I do better next time? And my answer is like, do you love the way it sounds? Yes, it sounds so good. Don't change anything in your mix because what you gave me allowed me to get it to this new product that you think I did something great on it, of course. But a lot of times I think people view what I do as if I like reworked the whole mix or something, you know, or production.
Right, or you fixed some issue inside the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's usually not what my approach is usually let's see what's here and let's see what I can basically enhance. You know, I don't really focus on fixing anything. I'm also like, I joke, like I boost until my problems go away. I'm a big booster. So like if I don't like the way, if I feel like something's potentially going to get in the way of our final loudness or something, I'll just boost around that so you don't hear it anymore. You know, and it usually just brings out the coolness of everything else that's surrounding it.
Right. Rather than diminishing some mud, you
I don't
bring
like
out
taking
the boom.
away anything from anyone's mix, really. Like, I feel like if they got it, if it's there for a reason. So I just choose to highlight certain things instead, you know?
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. It's kind of almost like, you know, when I'm working on a production that I want to mix, I'll take it out of the production session and bring it into the mix session because now it's a new mindset.
Right.
It's not that I missed anything in the production. I'm just now going to highlight things a little bit differently.
Right.
I'm going to make sure that the kick is a bit more sculpted and you know, juts out in the right, whatever.
And I think that's a mindset people don't really think about or think through because it's just like when you make a song, you write some lyrics and then you scratch them out and you write some new ones and then you eventually go record and then you do some comps and takes. And we've like accepted that you're building up all this kind of foundation. And then when it comes to mix and mastering, people's brains seem to explode where they're like, how can you do both? Well, you just do. You know where one ends and one begins. Just like at one stage you were writing lyrics and like singing to your phone and then you went to the studio and recorded it. Like, how did you do that? Like, how did you take it from a phone to like a recording at a studio, you know, or how did we need to be? I mean, I think some of it is a direct, it's pointing to how we don't have great community anymore with the death of studios, I'll say slowly. Sure. I don't want to say they're dead because they're not. Nashville's thriving, but overall studios have taken a hit, I know, over the years.
The landscape has changed. Let's put it that way.
That's a much better way. Thank you. That's the way to say it. Thank you. But part of the collaboration is you're able to observe where things begin and things end in community. And I feel like for me with mixing and mastering, when I'm in the mix stage, I am heavily focused on performance vibe, respecting the integrity of what's given to me. And I also know what mastering will take care of, quote unquote. Of like, I don't need this to hit so hard because I know eventually I'm going to hit the massive passive outboard, you know, on the low end, and then the low end will finally explode like I need it to. But if I do that now on an SSL channel strip and try to pimp out the 60 hertz, we're never going to get there. Like it'll be too overblown initially, and then that'll impact the way my mix bus compression hits, and then that will screw up mastering once we get to mastering. So it's a workflow thing, and I'm sure there's mixers out there who probably mix and master as well, and they have a totally different approach, which is totally fine. But I find for me that, you know, I know because I kind of worked as a mixer and then worked as a master engineer, and now mastering heavily focused. I also know at this stage what mixes sound like. You know, I literally 10,000 mixes. You know, I know what they sound like. So when I go into mix now, you know, and I mix like probably a couple songs a month for select clients still, different labels with publishing, mainly just pop stuff. You know, I know too now with this massive kind of catalog of these are what quote unquote mixes kind of sound like. So I know kind of where to take things and what's popular and what things sound like. And then I know what mastering can do to it. So that's kind of how I do it. You know, I don't find it difficult to mix and then master. I don't know if people are making it too difficult or they don't understand that mastering is really kind of just either the record is ready to come out and it's done or it's not. Now, there's a lot of ways to manipulate it to make it done, but I don't find it to be difficult to transition the mindset from one to the other. Maybe kind of like what you were saying of like from production to mixing. Like, I think it has a lot to do with experience. Like, I think that's it. You know, I'm 12 years into making records. So I've heard a lot of songs. I've worked on a lot of songs. I've met a lot of people. I've gotten tons of different opinions on what is mixing to you? 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 What is mastering to you? What is mastering? You know, and all these people essentially all have success. You know, none of them are incorrect in theory. They're all financially. They're just doing it their way. They're just doing it their way. So that's what I do. I just do it my way. And once again, some people like it. And some people, I don't even want to say don't like it. It's just not the right fit. It's more so, I think that, you know.
Yeah. Based on all the things you're saying, you know, I have a question. I think you maybe can answer it. Maybe it's a weird question, but it's, you know, like when we're mixing, you know, we're referencing masters. You know what I mean? We're not referencing mixed tracks. And so do you have like...
It's a problem.
I guess any insight into what a mix would sound like versus the master, or what a mixing engineer should be listening for in the mastering, what they should allow the mastering to kind of still do that, you know, the mixer isn't doing. Like,
that's a terrific question.
How do we bridge that gap?
Right.
Or like, you know, maybe someone just needs to make a, you know, some sort of Spotify reference mix playlist.
Matt and I have talked about this before of there needs to be a better library of just mixes. You know, like of CLA or Servant, not masters, because that's once again, I think, one of the lost arts of learning where something begins and something ends. You know, it's kind of what you're saying is 100% correct. Mixers are referencing masters, just like recording engineers are referencing masters. You know, that's kind of how we got to where we are with loudness and compression is you're referencing a mastered kick drum at the recording stage. So of course the client is like, I need the kick to sound like that. Well, that kick got there because of a specific 5-step process, probably, you know, of like, it was recorded properly gain stage. And then, you know, the drum kit was probably awesome too. And the recording was probably great. And then the mixer did stuff. And then the mastering did stuff. And now you're hearing the final product of that kick drum that's been manipulated 20 different ways, you know, to get there. So we kind of have this problem of like snake biting its own tail situation of like, that's part of why I like doing the podcast. I like education, and I wish there was more in-person education, you know, within studios, because I want people to know what a kick drum sounds like. What does a wood kick drum sound like? What does this beater head sound like? There's so many things people don't know. They're missing out on so much within music. And that A, makes me sad, but B, it limits their ceiling of potential, because they're 100% unaware that there's 30 different snare drums. You know, they've just downloaded a sample and they just replace everything with this one sample of a Black Beauty snare, fully unaware that it's the wrong tone, wrong key, wrong size. It's, you know, like it, you know, and then it starts feeling weird. Like a lot of people make a lot of strange records, and they wonder like, why doesn't it sound very good? Or why does my clients not like, you know, my work? And a lot of it is just because you just don't know better. Like, you just have not had the opportunity to hear what does a mix sound like? What does just a clean session, recorded session sound like? What does a good bass guitar sound like? Just straight up. What does it need to sound like from the source? What kind of strings? You know, what kind of, is it wood? Is it, you know, all these things add up to great records. And I think, like, to answer your question, I wish there was a place where people could hear mixes. And for me, I think for mixers who are referencing masters, you know, as like they're trying to get their mix to be like the master, the main thing that usually kills people is like over compression, you know, at the mix stage. So they're trying to compete. They're trying to get as loud as the master at the mix stage. And it's really hard to do that, especially if you're not a master engineer. And you don't, to me, know foundational kind of balance and perceived loudness and metering and, you know, the things we do to get it sounding super huge and loud, compression, more loud, more often. So a lot of times, one of the biggest factors mixers are always focused on, can I make it as loud as the master, and really what they're doing is just removing low end and anything good in their mix. Because I'll tell a lot of my mixers, man, your mix I'm working off of is amazing, but your heated reference is terrible. Like the contrast between what the client is usually signed off of and what I work off of, is usually pretty night and day of like, you're actually a great mixer. Your references just kind of sound terrible. So we need to bridge this gap where you don't take 8 dB off with a fab filter. Like that's part of your problem with your clients is like, you need to train your clients that there's this thing called mastering that will get it as loud as we need it to go. I'm not anti-loudness at all. I pretty much only make loud records.
I was looking on your website before this call, and I love it. Like you have like resource for clients, and like you say, like bold letters, like I don't make your record however loud you want to make it.
Right,
I'm fine with that.
And I pretty much do only make loud records, and I've gotten really good at making huge, full, loud records and keeping low end in it too. But it's something that it is all our responsibilities to educate everyone on every step because it's on my mixers, and I tell my mixers, you need to tell your client, like, do they like, if just give them the mix. And if you mix into compression and limiting, that's great. If that's your flow and you do that at the mix stage and that's part of your sound, which I know it is, it's part of my sound. My mixes are not super dynamic. They're already being compressed, mix bus compression. They've been group, VCA, the drums have already been compressed. The vocals have been compressed. They're all summing into more compression. That's great. Sure. We love that sound. It's not a huge hindrance to getting us. That is almost, honestly, that's necessary to get us to the loudness we need to get to. Like things need to be somewhat bricked already. Like when we come to the mastering, if the goal is to get to a certain loudness to compete in top 40 pop, because it's just the sound. So, but I tell my mixers, tell your clients like to focus on, basically I tell my mixers, just back off a hair. Instead of taking 8 dB off with the fab filter, take 3. Like just get used to mixing at that level where it is loud. It's not going to be as loud as the Justin Bieber record you're referencing. Of course, sometimes they run into a thing where the rough they got is smoking loud. And so the client is like, well, our demo is better, aka louder than your mix, so you suck, like as a mixer. So I usually tell my clients, if you run into that, if you don't have, all of this really circles honestly back to trust. Like you just need to do one project really well where everybody trusts you. And then from then on, everybody trusts you, like pretty much. Yeah. So like as a mixer, you've got to fight for your client's trust. In general, you should be doing that. But just say, hey, this is as loud as it's going to go. When it goes to mastering, it'll be super, loud, Justin Bieber, whatever you want it to be. Sam will take care of it. Don't worry about it. I need you to trust me, trust the process. We can always go back to the mix stage and make it take 10 dB off with the fab filter if you hate Sam's work. Like, we can always go do that. Of course, they never do. They always, mine's even louder than that version, or we're in a stage too where like accessibility, like everybody has plugins and DAWs. So like I get people more and more, I get people who are like, hey, I dropped your master into my DAW and took 8 dB out here and then boosted 3 dB here and blah, blah. And I like the way that sounds. I'm like, it's not how this works really. Like, it's one of those things where I just say, what would you like me to do? Like, we can do that. But at that stage, you should just master it yourself, or, you trust that in my room, it's more accurate, and not just accurate, but I know finished records better than you. And I know this will actually compete in the playlist world, as opposed to you just in your room. I don't say messing around, but kind of just messing around with a master, thinking that you can just toss an EQ on after, and
that seems pretty, obviously not a professional mastering thing to do. But I would say that it's just like, understanding what mastering is, I think, is like the first step in like educating your clients, the artists you work with. And, thanks to your show, And also just for me interviewing a lot of mastering engineers, it just really lifted that veil where I didn't really fully understand what mastering was before I started this podcast. And now I have a very good